If you want to grow your business, there comes a point where you have to bring on employees. And as you bring on those employees, it's really important to make sure that you relate to them correctly and you build on a strong foundation. In today's video, I'm going to be sharing with you some mistakes that I made and kind of a eureka moment that I had over the past couple months as we've grown our company to just about 60 employees, and as we've learned and grown, some of the mistakes we made, maybe things that I wouldn't have done several years ago as we started growing the business. What is up, everyone? My name is Jonathan, host here at the Venue RX, and on this show, we are passionate about documenting and sharing best practices around owning, operating, and managing world-class wedding venues. We really have a belief here that wedding venue education should be available and accessible to everyone, and so we're doing that here as much as possible here on the show. We also have consulting services that we've just launched, as well as our venue management company, where it's a fully done-for-you business service. So we'll come in and manage the property for you. But this podcast has been so much fun because we've been able to interview business owners, venue owners, people who are experts in different sections of the industry, and then sometimes we do solo content like today's video. Now, if you're joining us for the first time, I'm so excited you're here. Thank you for joining us. As you begin to listen to this more, I hope you do, consider sharing it with a friend, consider subscribing and being a part of this journey with us. It is absolutely not possible without all of our listeners, without all of our viewers sharing this content either on social media and tagging us, or maybe even just sharing it with friends in the industry. And that's how we grow. We don't run any ads to this show or anything like that. So you guys referring, reviewing, and subscribing means the world to me and the rest of the team here. All right, let's get into the topic for today. This is something that I had to learn the hard way. And I think as small business owners, at one point we just had a couple of contractors we were working with when we had a staffing company. And I guess I should give you a little backstory. So we actually had a staffing company that was meeting the needs of the local market here in the San Diego area, and it grew to be the Southern California area as a whole. And what we were doing is we realized there wasn't really high quality temporary staff services in our area. And so we started meeting that need by, first it was our friend group and our family group, and then we expanded it. We started hiring and recruiting, and we got to the place we were almost 900 people. But, at that point we learned a lot of lessons, but we didn't have like a heavy duty HR department or anything like that. And the reason for that was so many of the individuals we were working with were 1099s at a certain point. And that's really where we started. We started very basic. We were literally handing out checks and envelopes to people at the very beginning. And then we started getting checks, and then we had a payroll system, and we really matured through the process. But even the level that we were doing things at that point, even though we had a lot of employees, wasn't really a very mature way of doing business. Now, as California came out with this ABC test, a new way to classify employees versus contractors, we realized, okay, we need to make a shift. So we started migrating people from contractor to W-2 employee, and that was an expensive and time-consuming process. So as we started doing that process, then COVID comes. That business did get shut down for several months, and then we opened it back up, built it back up, and then ended up getting acquired by a competing company, actually, which was kind of cool. But one of the things that I've realized is when you're managing people, it's really important to set expectations extremely clearly up front. And I know that sounds like a no-brainer. You might be listening to that going, duh, obviously you should do that. But that doesn't come as naturally. We can't build this just around my brain. We have to, start growing the team. We have to delegate. I have to delegate. We started, delegating little pieces of stuff, and this is still with the staffing company. And what we saw happening was, maybe the quality would go down a little bit because it wasn't me touching everything, but it did free me up to be able to do other things to help grow the business, to help develop those key and strategic relationships that we needed. And it was my wife and I and a couple of team members, and we were all wearing all of the hats for 2 different venues that we were managing at the time. And none of us necessarily knew how to do everything, but we knew that we could figure it out. Now, as we started delegating things to a couple of the team members, I wasn't really clear on who I wanted to have do what, right? It was just kind of like, hey, this needs to be handled. Can you figure it out? Well, what ended up happening is as we started growing and as now all of a sudden there were more needs, right? There were more things that needed to get done. And instead of just going wide and broad, we needed to go deep in some of these roles as well. And as we started adding on venues, it was very quickly apparent that one person as the venue manager, the sales manager, the person to follow with all the leads, the person to set up the chairs and take down the chairs, that couldn't be one person. And I found that out very quickly because, I was employee number one in this, right? My wife and I. So we were wearing all of the hats. And what we realized is as we started growing, we wanted to start delegate some of that responsibility so they could sit more in one individual seat. And this didn't really go over well. And they took it very personally. They really wanted to do their best, and so they felt like doing their best was doing a lot. And I think that's a trap that a lot of entrepreneurs and a lot of business owners fall into. You feel like you have to do it all to make sure that it stays high quality. And so for some of these early employees, they were wearing 4 hats. Now all of a sudden, I want to take some of those hats off and I want to start bringing new employees in and giving them delegate some of those responsibilities that were originally by employee number 1 or employee number 2. And it felt very much like those employees, those early employees, were losing control over some of the different elements that they once had control over. The management team's mouth was, you're doing such a good job, but we need to grow, we need to expand, and so we need to bring on this other individual. And what was heard by that employee was, I'm not doing a good job, and there was a lot of this kind of really fear-based response. And it did feel very much for some of those early employees like we were just pulling the rug out from under them. Like we didn't consult with them, like we didn't, ask for their opinion. And this was a struggle because on one hand, we do want to give them respect and deference and honor, but on the other hand, our business has to grow. You want to grow, and the answer is not always just doing more. A lot of times the answer is documenting the process and delegating that process to an individual that you bring on so that you can start pursuing more leverage with your time. I think where I fell down on the job was I didn't clearly explain very clearly, both in written, communication, emails and all that, as well as verbally, regularly, that they were only sitting in these seats temporarily until we had the infrastructure, until we were making the money to hire the other employees. And it ends up becoming a very negative thing where I'm looking at it as a very positive thing. And so we're gonna have that person trained on this. So it's the next 90 days. Thank you so much for helping us get it done. You're amazing. Thank you for being day one, day 1 employee, day 2 employee, right? But we have to take these hats off so we can continue serving the rest of our clients, right? And I wish I would have said that, and I wish I would have reinforced that. The processes that we were supposed to be following as a team, the things that we talked about, weren't getting done because each one of those individual team members wanted to do things their own way. And so I think if I could provide one bit of encouragement based on my own experience, it would be, be really clear with your team, especially if you're kind of in the infancy stages of your business, and whether that's a venue, whether that's a catering company, whatever it is, right? Don't be shy about having that level of transparency with your team, and then say, hey, we're gonna get to this place, and then we're gonna take this hat off, and I want you to be in charge of training that person because they're gonna take over for you. And then instead of just being broad, we're gonna really go deep. I think it's really important to correctly incentivize the behavior that you're looking for. And so if you have an employee, you have an individual in a certain role and you're not incentivizing them correctly, you may not get the type of work that you'd like to get out of them because you're incentivizing them to do operations when maybe they're in sales. I hope this video has been valuable, and I'd love to hear where you're at in your stage of business. If you're just a solopreneur, just having your first employee, that's awesome. That's such a fun and exciting place to be. Or if you're scaling a team, you've got 5, 6, 10, 12, 15 people on your team, I'd love to hear that as well. And if there are specific concerns or things that you've learned as well, I'd love to hear about those and maybe even have you on the show. This show is about documenting and sharing all those best practices for running world-class venues. And I'm thankful for all of you here on the show. That's it for today's video. We'll see you in the next video.